question of identity is a question involving the most profound panic, a terror as primary as the nightmare of the mortal fall. This question can scarcely be said to exist among the wretched, who know merely that they are wretched and who bear it day by day. It is a mistake to suppose that the wretched do not know that they are wretched, nor does this question exist among the splendid, who know merely that they are splendid, and who flaunt it day by day. It is a mistake to suppose that the splendid have any intention of surrendering their splendor. An identity is questioned only when it is menaced, as when the mighty begin to fall, or when the wretched begin to rise, or when the stranger enters the gates, never thereafter to be a stranger. The stranger's presence making you the stranger, less to the stranger than to yourself. Identity would seem to be the garment with which one covers the nakedness of the self, in which case it is best that the garment be loose, a little like the robes of the desert, through which robes one's nakedness can always be felt, and, sometimes, discerned. This trust in one's nakedness is all that gives one the power to change one's robes.
Hello and welcome to Raise a Glass, the podcast where we talk about the stories and storytellers that shape us. My name is Eric Lintola.
And I am Hunter Danson.
We're so excited you're here with us today to discuss James Baldwin, a certain collection of short stories and pieces and essays that Baldwin wrote. Hunter's going to lead us in that discussion in a little bit today, but before we get there, Hunter, I got to know, what's in your glass?
Well, I have my trusty Aldi's Hopping Nomad IPA here.
It's all about the sound.
Pour. Yeah. It's a good beer. You know, Aldi beers, they're not as flashy as your Juice Forces and whatever's that they're coming out with, all the fancy names and stuff, but it gets the job done. What's in your glass here?
A lot of head you have on that beer right now.
I know, it wasn't a smooth pour. But
not the most impressive. I'm actually coming to enjoy IPAs a lot more now that we're past the IPA whatever we had about 10 years ago, where things were just so hoppy that they were just not inedible, like, I don't know, indrinkable. I don't know what the undrinkable, I guess. I also brought a beer today. It's very rare that we bring the same type of drink. I have a barrel-aged Casey's Christmas Ale. It's an imperial brown ale with tart cherry. I have yet to taste the tart cherry, but I'll try real hard today. It's from Rohrbach Brewing Company here in Rochester, New York. Now, I was told that this is for Guinness, you're supposed to just, like, flat out let it drain into the can.
You know, the nitro?
But this is not a nitro, and I should not have done what I just did. I said that yours had a lot of head. Mine's like, it's a half the pint. So give me about 5 minutes, and I might take my first sip of non-foam. Before I get there, Hunter, what are you raising and pouring out for?
Well, my raise and pour are connected this week. I'm pouring one out for potentially another forever war in the current events in Iran, and it's just shameful. There's no other way to put it. But I'm raising a glass to a song by Roger Waters that came out on an album called Amused to Death. and the song is called "The Bravery of Being Out of Range," and it's just such a... Roger Waters is from Pink Floyd, and he has the ability to write songs about current events in a way that is artistic and emotional and very human. It's not like, he does make political statements, but they're not like, that's not all there is, you know. He gets to the heart of the matter. The bravery of being out of range, you know, the refrain is, we're still playing the game with the bravery of being out of range, referring to the fact that wars now, we just drop bombs from 3,000 miles away.
Yeah.
And great song. I highly recommend giving it a listen. And the whole album, honestly. It's a great album. But you, Eric?
Well, before we get there, I did manage to pour my entire beer into this cup. I did not expect it to be as exactly a pint size as it actually ended up turning out to be. So, Hunter, I'll let you see it. I don't think I could add another drop to this cup without it spilling over.
There you go.
So let me just take my first sip. It's a very strong beer.
Oh, yeah.
I will likely not finish it by the time we finish this conversation. My pour, I'll start with there because that's the one I've been thinking about this morning, kind of came to me. It's somewhat related to what you shared. It's not about the war in Iran but on the computer I work on uses Microsoft for everything. And there's a little button, like the little Windows button in the bottom corner of Microsoft computer, and if you accidentally touch it, it opens up a browser, not a browser, but like a browser type thing. It's about 2/3 the size of your screen that has news and the stock market and all this other stuff.
Everything we don't want.
And the thing is, it's really hard. I haven't figured out how to exit out of it. And while that's annoying, that's not what I'm pouring one out for. What I'm pouring one out for is and I haven't figured out the right wording for this, but it's like almost the desensitizing of content on media and news outlets. And so I accidentally clicked on this button, and the news outlet was showing me a scene of police brutality, a video that I couldn't exit out of, and that I didn't want to see. Not because I don't want to not be aware of those types of things happening, but because it's a traumatizing type experience, or can be. And that's something that's becoming more and more. I don't know what happened or where the moment was, and if social media is what's driven this, but even like professional news outlets like are just showing dead bodies and like these really intense scenes, like without the opportunity to choose whether you consume it or not. Like I feel like if I'm going to read an article or choose to read an article and there's going to be graphic content, I feel like at the very least, maybe it should let you know, hey, there's graphic like pictures or videos in this, or like have it be blurred and you click on it to open it or something. Like, it feels like I can't see how that's a benefit to anybody. It's a benefit that we are able to, with our devices and other things, capture things that we haven't captured before, right? To make sure that these terrible things, whatever they might be happening, wherever they might be, or wherever they might be from, or however they might be happening, are captured so that justice can be met, at least retributive justice and hopefully restorative as well. But to then have it be so you can't, even if you accidentally click on something or accidentally see something or choosing to read something, but that you can't like not consume the visual image of it, right? Because there are visual images that live in all of our brains that you can't unsee or you can't forget. And I think more and more of that is happening to more and more people. And I can't imagine that it's good for any of us.
That's what the whole album Amused to Death is about.
Okay.
He wrote it in like the 90s and about television. And it's based partly on a book by Neil Postman called Amusing Ourselves to Death. And it was, just the title is Amused to Death. This fact that news infotainment, this genre was created where the news, they profit from holding your attention. Yeah. And the best way to hold your attention is to shock you. Yeah. And keep you watching.
Yeah. Well, I will raise a glass to something that we've talked about recently, but I don't think it's made onto our podcast, our last podcast. And that's the Winter Olympics.
Yay!
Winter Olympics have finished. We're now looking ahead to LA 2028, and then the French Alps in 2030. And so those, I think, will both be really fun Olympics. But it was there was a lot going on this last Winter Olympics. Lots of highs, lots of lows, lots of like moments of celebration and sadness, and if you dive too deeply, you could end up having lots of different types of conversations. But that's not the point of this raise. I love the Olympics. I know you love the Olympics as well, Hunter, and we've talked about it for hours. And I think they were genuinely fun, and there was some really incredible competition, and among the athletes, some really beautiful moments of celebration and of camaraderie and peace and unity. And so that's what I'll raise to.
All right.
So Hunter, you've been wanting to talk about James Baldwin for quite a while. Baldwin has had an impact in your life. I know the goal was to get this podcast out in February. It's going to come out in March instead. But can you tell me why are we discussing James Baldwin, and then after that, can you share a little bit of what we will be discussing?
Yeah.
And of who James Baldwin is. It's just the why, the what, and the who. Maybe not in that order.
So I'm actually going to read this little bio, I guess, from the copy of Sunny Blues that I sent you. Sunny's Blues that I sent you to read. Born in New York City, the son of a revivalist minister, James Baldwin, 1924 to 1987, was raised in poverty in Harlem, where at the age of 14, he became a preacher in the Fireside Pentecostal Church. After completing high school, he decided to become a writer, and with the help of the Black American expatriate writer Richard Wright, won a grant that enabled him to move to Paris, where he lived for most of his remaining years. There he wrote the critically acclaimed Go Tell It on the Mountain, 1953, a novel about the religious awakening of a 14-year-old black youth. Subsequent works, focusing on the intellectual and spiritual trials of black men in a white racist society, included the novels Giovanni's Room, Another Country, both famous at the time for their homosexual themes, Tell Me How Long the Train's Been Gone, If Beale Street Could Talk, Just Above My Head, and Harlem Quartet, the play Blues for Mr. Charlie, and the powerful nonfiction commentaries Notes of a Native Son, Nobody Knows My Name, and The Fire Next Time. Baldwin's short stories are collected in Going to Meet the Man. So, I met Baldwin in my library. They have this classics section, which is great, that I just wander around in. And I saw Go Tell It on the Mountain. I think it was around Black History Month, and I was looking for a black writer to read. And I picked up Go Tell It on the Mountain, and it changed my life. I was like, it. I'll get into more of it later, but the language captivated me. He was wrestling with things that I had been struggling with for a really long time, conflicting feelings of love and also disappointment in the church and spiritual struggle and awakening, and tied all together with race and experience of poverty. And it's just a beautiful, his language is beautiful. He said in his essay about Shakespeare that he listened a lot to jazz, very closely to jazz and blues, and he tried to write sort of like the jazz in the way that he writes, in the cadence of his sentences and things. It's beautiful. It's a great book. And so after that, I just they had an essay collection, so I picked up the essay collection and I read lots of essays, and I think I've read all the nonfiction stuff now in the essay collection, and I've read 2 more of his novels, and I'm going to read more. I want to read everything eventually, but Baldwin to me is just, he's a friend to turn to when I need some comfort from everything that is going on in the world, and the pain and the suffering, but I want comfort, but I don't want to turn away from. I don't want to escape. I want to. I want someone to, like, what do I do with all of this pain? You know, and Baldwin for me really. He's honest, and he confronts it, and he makes something beautiful out of it. And as we talk about Sonny's blues, Baldwin for me does something similar to what Sonny does for the narrator of that story. So the stories we're going to talk about are Sonny's Blues, the short story, and then the nonfiction. I had Eric read's introduction to Notes of a Native Son, and then also some of Devil Fine's work. And I chose these because I feel like they are, when you mentioned Baldwin, he's known for Go Tell It on the Mountain and for The Fire Next Time and some of his other nonfiction and stuff, which are things that you should definitely go and read. But I wanted to bring something that maybe wasn't talked about as much, but have arguably shaped me more, that I refer to frequently and I think about a lot, several quotes, especially in Devil Fine's work. I also want to mention that there is a great podcast called Sacred and Profane Love, and they have an episode with Dr. Cornel West, where they talk about Go Tell It on the Mountain and The Fire Next Time. And you should go listen to that too.
I can say that you should not listen to it on anything faster than 1 time speed. Maybe you should listen to it on 0.75 speed. Cornel West is one of the most brilliant thinkers of our modern age, maybe ever. And to follow his thinking at the speed in which he's communicating it, he's a great communicator, and he communicates so deeply, so quickly, so across such a breadth of things that I found and continue to find that I need to listen to him slower. like if you're gonna, it's like you're gonna read something, you gotta read it twice in order to like really mind the depths. Now, I also haven't read The Fire Next Time or Go Tell It on the Mountain, so maybe it would have made more sense to me.
Yeah. I've listened to it multiple times, so, yeah, but there's so much there.
Yeah. Well, Hunter, I would love to follow your lead on this, but I guess I would say that we should probably start with Notes of a Native Son, right? That's the autobiographical notes that you had me read?
Yes.
Okay, because I feel like it's actually one of the things that I found with at least these three pieces you gave to me, is I had a really challenging time having started with the notes, like this, the autobiographical notes is what the subtitle or this piece was, trying to divorce what I then knew about James Baldwin from the characters in the other stories. So the narrator in Sonny's Blues, and then the narrator in Devil Finds Work. Is that what you just called him, a narrator? Which from what I could tell is also part of one of Baldwin's strengths, from what Dr. Cornel West was saying, and maybe a little bit of even what you shared is and what I've read other spaces is the autobiographical nature, which he even brings into his fiction. Or are both of these considered nonfiction? Which I guess is maybe a better question too.
Yeah. So Notes of a Native Son and Devil Finds Work are nonfiction.
Okay, but Sonny's Blues is fiction.
Fiction, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm excited to discuss these pieces.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the interesting thing is that Go Tell It on the Mountain is really, really rooted in Baldwin's childhood and his relationship with his father, and and I think that's what a lot of great fiction is, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
okay,
so you read the autobiographical notes. What are some things that jumped out to you that you might have underlined, or?
Yeah. Well, I had a big question for you, but we'll get to that in a minute because that's not the question you asked me. I underlined lots of things, so you'll have to wait a moment for me to share exactly what comes to mind first. I guess there are at least three passages that I'll just kind of read. Maybe you can bring some further context to them after I read them. The first one is on the third page of this. He's talking about the past, and he says, "But I think that the past is all that makes the present coherent, and further that the past will remain horrible for exactly as long as we refuse to assess it honestly." He's talking about the writer's prime concern, and I don't know, that piece stood out to me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of a combination of very deep thinking shared very plainly, but in ways that are very like full of emotion. And maybe not necessarily even like crying emotion, even though it's very clear that like this is a man who's like searched the depth of his souls, and like that's what he sees as the role of the author, of the writer, or the artist. He says, right, this is the only real concern of the artist, to recreate out of the disorder of life that order which is art. He talks so much about hatred, and fear. I feel like if I were to read some of those quotes, I'd need to read the whole paragraph, and I'm not going to do that at this moment. And then I'm going to bring us to the end of the last page, the last paragraph. I love America more than any other country in the world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. I think all theories are suspect, that the finest principles may have to be modified or may even be pulverized by the demands of life, and that one must find, therefore, one's own moral center and move through the world hoping that this center will guide one aright. I consider that I have many responsibilities, but none greater than this, to last, as Hemingway says, and get my work done. I want to be an honest man and a good writer. Maybe the singular sentence that I connected with the most in what he shared, and it's very much driven by the current historical context and my experience within it, is this phrase, is this sentence: I love America more than any other country in the world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. I think there's something really beautiful in that. And I don't want to get the conversation too far afield, but I feel like within the context in which we are Americans, and we both are, I don't think it is either of our primary identities, but within our identity of being American, one of the things I still find incredibly beautiful, or maybe even find more beautiful now in the midst of what's been a very contentious and challenging political moment and historical moment, I would say, is that collectively Americans still hold to the vision of what America is. And I think the reason why there's, at any point, and this point being one of them, protests and frustrations and anger and debate that happens within this country, is because there is still a collective vision for what America can be or should be. I don't know if it's safe to say we ever have been it. I'm not sure those words written on the Statue of Liberty were ever actually true. Actually true for some people at some times in some situations who look a certain way and come from a certain place and speak a certain language and have a certain job, which by definition doesn't connect with "give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, your refuse." It's, and yet, even though being American is not my primary identity, I still do love this country as well. And love that I have the right and maybe insist on the right to criticize where I see issues. And I think the moment that we stop criticizing is probably the same moment that we lose the vision for what this country could be. And at that moment is the moment of the fall of this country. When one could rightly use the word, as loaded of a word as it is, of empire. I wish that weren't a word that I would feel comfortable would use, but I think the moment we lose that vision is the moment this country ceases to be. That's what I have for you, Hunter.
Thanks. Well, I think that's actually a great example of what reading Baldwin is like to me, because he says, I want to be an honest man and a good writer. And Baldwin, what's amazing to me is that he contains everything. Like when you read his nonfiction, he doesn't limit himself to any subject. And yet he stays on the line of what the essay is about. He's not just throwing stuff out there, but he goes into all of the nuances of what a thought can mean and the feelings and what it's actually like to live with it. And he refrains frequently, and he says, I do not believe that the unexamined life is worth living. Which was attributed to Socrates, is the unexamined life is not worth living.
Okay. Yeah.
And that is why that Cornel West calls Baldwin a Socratic prophet. Because Baldwin is incredibly well read. In his autobiographical notes, he says that he would have his most recently born sibling in one hand and a book in the other hand. And for him, the early books he talks about in Everybody's Protest novel about Uncle Tom's Cabin and A Tale of Two Cities, I believe, and also Crime and Punishment, I think, were pretty formative early on. But, he's quite young and he's reading these books. So, he's always reading. He spent a lot of time in Paris. He's very well educated. And so he has this way of thinking that he is, sort of learned from the West, this Western way. But he is also black, and he's seen how he is despised by this Western tradition. And he, so that's why he's like a Socratic prophet, because he is also, his father was a preacher, so he's very well versed in the Bible and in the Old Testament and the tradition of prophets who are, crying out to God and a lot of times criticizing their people, for disobeying God and being hypocritical, and so he's and that's honestly, it's just, that's what I love, is because he's so honest. Because there's great things to be said about critical thinking and being able to write a quote unquote unbiased essay. But the flip side of that is that no essay is actually unbiased. You can do everything you can to remove your bias, but you're still a person writing an essay.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a great exercise to learn more about yourself, to try and remove your own bias. But it's also, in a way, sort of disingenuous, because you're trying to remove the humanity from it. And Baldwin doesn't remove the humanity from it. He is always attuned to the experience of his life and what these ideas mean to him.
Oh, yeah. I as you were sharing that was helping clarify some things for me, but I was also looking at one of his paragraphs on the third page of this story, of this autobiographical notes, and I was trying to figure out what part I would quote, and then I was like, I guess I would just have to quote the entire paragraph. And it probably is important to note, and we've talked about this in other episodes, that we are both white men, and that we bring ourselves into this conversation where we are. Especially as this became especially clear to me, or maybe I wanted to share it because his no, I've got nothing to add. You named it. And if I were to try to add more, it would be taking away unless I read just this entire thing. So, right, I'm really glad that I read this first.
Yeah.
And I did wonder, Hunter, you said, I want to be an honest man and a good writer. And I know you were quoting Baldwin, and I think it was pretty clear that you're quoting him in that. But isn't that your goal?
Yeah, I mean, Baldwin, I guess it must have been several years ago now that I discovered Baldwin. And as I read more and more of him, I just... not sure how personal I want to go, but I, to this point, have not made any money from my writing. I've made $7 from my writing. I had one article on Medium. And I think the difficulty that I've faced is that it's not that I don't think that there's a market for my writing or the type of writing that I do. It's that I think the type of writing that one can make money from most easily these days is not writing like Baldwin's. It's more, it has to be slick and, more like a traditional essay. And I guess as I have developed my own voice as a writer, I've looked at Baldwin in the way that he's sort of, like I said, he contains everything. He doesn't shy away from any thought, and and because when I started writing, like, I guess I have a website where I blog and I put my essays and stuff. I sort of tried to adapt what I had learned in college, which is critical thinking. You try to remove yourself as much as you can from it, use your evidence. And those are all useful tools, that sort of research and things. But it's not very entertaining to read. And it's, like I said, it's a little bit disingenuous when you're trying to remove yourself from it. And I read Baldwin and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And so as I've tried to develop my own voice, I've tried to not really copy Baldwin, but just sort of try to find my way through everything. So I feel like one of the essays I'm most proud of is The Last Recovery, which is an essay about rereading Tolkien. And if you read it, you'll see that I have a lot of my own lived experience in that essay. I'm sort of examining my own experience and my own memories for what Tolkien means to me and why I think it's important to reread it and what reading it did for me, and what I was able to discover about myself and about Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings. And so that Baldwin has really been an inspiration for me in bringing my own experience into my writing, versus trying to remove my own experience as much as possible.
Yeah. We live in a moment where there's a cultural, I like to use a phrase cultural lie. I don't know if that's the right word for this, but or phrase for this, but there's a cultural lie that we tell ourselves through what we consume, how we consume it, that we don't want to think. We don't want to be challenged. We don't want to be, you named it earlier, comforted as much as we want to escape. And that the role of movies, TV shows, books, music is primarily a role of escapism. And it's one driven by a specific time and specific techniques. And I'll name it. I really like a lot of escapist books and TV shows and movies. I do. I really enjoy them. Yeah. And we talk about some of them on this podcast. But if you've listened with us up till now, props to you. You probably noticed that in our podcast episodes, most of them are not driven by the depth of the things I consume, because they're not all that deep. A lot of them are driven by the deeper thinker of the two of us, which is very clearly Hunter. I can thankfully do just enough to keep up in some of these conversations. But I've used a language before. It's the difference between eating a delicious dessert and a 5-course meal. And if your voice isn't coming out in what is an incredibly vulnerable situation in which you're writing, then why are you writing?
Yeah. Exactly.
You brought up earlier, Hunter, that one of the ways Baldwin writes, and this might be something he's named, or it's just something that's become clear over time, is that he writes jazz into the cadence of his sentences. That's what you said. And oh my goodness, was that clear, or is that clear in the reading of Sonny's Blues? This was my favorite piece that we read. It took me on a whirlwind of things. But especially the ending of it. He has a way of in the middle of a sentence, he'll just change to another sentence. Let's see if I can find one of those good examples. Where is this? He italicizes it. He doesn't do it all that often, but you don't need to do it that often. In fact, it's stronger when you only do it on occasion. Honestly, I'm not sure if he's using two sentences here or writing one sentence in two ways. But here on page 141, they're listening to somebody sing. They were singing, and then he italicizes, "If I could only hear my mother pray again." And so as I was reading that, I was like, there's no period after the word singing, and yet there's a capitalized I for if.
And yeah. I think those are the lyrics that they're singing.
Okay, because that's what I couldn't tell. Yeah. It was what the words they were singing, but I don't think it actually is the words they were singing. To me, that's an internal thought he had, because we'd heard his mom praying multiple times, and these aren't logical words for a song, or for the songs that these women and this man were singing. I think, and there's no quotes. I think he's narrating, they were singing, and then in the midst of that narration, he's just living into it so much that he's like, if I could only hear my mother pray again. Like, that's how I read it. I read it as one cohesive moment where his thoughts broke into his experience, or his like narration. And that's not something that people do. They would say, most people would say they were singing, and then I thought, if I could only hear my mother pray again, or their singing reminded me, if I could, of my mom's praying, or something that's maybe more grammatically accurate, and yet way less accurate to how any of us actually experience life.
Yeah.
So I experienced the jazz of this. I also love playing jazz. I don't get to do it very often.
Yeah.
But
so can I respond to the?
Yes.
Okay. Because I think that it is the lyrics, but I think that it works both ways, because something about Baldwin is that he uses lyrics from a lot of black spirituals and songs, and blues songs and everything, and he uses them in his writing. And I think this is a great example of how it works both ways, because if they are actually singing, if I could only hear my mother pray again, it is, even if it's not technically his intention that he's thinking it, it does represent how we interact with songs, where we will hear a song and then we'll think of a memory of our mother or someone. And then the next one later on, he says, the three sisters and the brother, heads bowed, were singing, God be with you till we meet again. And so he's really good at using lyrics like that in a way that is just, it just fits so perfectly and is so elegant. And and to your point about like his music is like, his writing is like jazz. He's like a master of commas. Because it just has a beat. His commas like have a beat in the sentence, like just the rhythm. Like on page 140 at the beginning, it was strange suddenly to watch, though I had been seeing these street meetings all my life. The way he just kind of puts in suddenly there, and then to watch. It's just, it was strange suddenly to watch. It's like it has a beat, it has a rhythm, and it wouldn't really be the same if he was just like, it was strange to watch, though I had been seeing these street meetings all my life. That's like the flavor of his writing, is this like sort of cadence that I just find utterly attractive and just really pleasant to listen to, even if I'm not reading it out loud. I'm hearing it.
Yeah, and that same language and choice of commas and length of sentences are the things that would have gotten marked red in school.
Exactly. Too many commas. Yeah.
Too long of a
Simplify your
sentence.
sentences.
Yeah. Hunter, what is Sonny's Blues?
So, Sonny's Blues is about two brothers. It's narrated from the point of view of the elder brother, who's a teacher by now, and he finds out that his brother is almost overdosed on heroin, and they had been sort of estranged. They at this point for I think over a year, and he says in the beginning, like, I couldn't believe it. It's like, because I couldn't believe it, but what I mean by that is that I couldn't find any room for it anywhere inside me. And he's sort of trying to accept that it, he's seen it happen to so many other kids.
Yeah.
But he didn't want to believe that it was happening to his brother. So Sonny, goes into like rehab, and then he comes out, and the teacher, older brother, ends up sending him a letter, and basically it all culminates in sort of a reconciliation where the Sonny asks the teacher, the older brother, to come with him to one of his performances to see it, and the teacher just never really didn't really get jazz. He just didn't really listen to it. He wasn't into it, and the part of their estrangement is the fact that Sonny, like, basically dropped out of school to study jazz and play jazz, and he ended up, doing heroin because there were a lot of players who ended up on drugs, and so they were always fighting about that. But what the teacher begins to see is that Sonny is really, like, struggling with something. He's struggling for how to make how to make sense of it all, and his way of doing that is playing the piano. And it culminates in, quite honestly, the most beautiful description of music that I have ever encountered in print.
Accurate.
I read this and I was just crying. I was like,
that makes sense.
Someone just captured what the blues is like in a story, and it's just, you should read it. It's a short story. It's not too long. I'll put it in the show notes. There's a free PDF you can print out, and yeah.
If I could add one of the only pieces that might shed some additional light on it, is at this point, Sonny's and this teacher's, his older brothers, both of their parents have died. And so, right before, or not right before, but before she died, the older brother, the narrator, his mom told him to watch out for Sonny.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pretty moving scene. And so that's, mm-hmm. He said he would, but that's been going on in his brain for a lot of this time as well. And I think it's part of what's gnawing at his conscience.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's this little exchange that they have where they're able to sort of have a heart-to-heart. Sonny's able to talk to him, and they're talking about suffering. The narrator says, I said, but there's no way not to suffer, is there, Sonny? I believe not, he said, and smiled. But that's never stopped anyone from trying. He looked at me. Has it? I realized with this mocking look that there stood between us forever, beyond the power of time or forgiveness, the fact that I had held silence so long, when he had needed human speech to help him. He turned back to the window. No, there's no way not to suffer, but you try all kinds of ways to keep from drowning in it, to keep on top of it, and to make it seem, well, like you did something all right, and now you're suffering for it, you know? I said nothing. Well, you know, he said impatiently. Why do people suffer? Maybe it's better to do something to give it a reason, any reason. But we just agreed, I said, that there's no way not to suffer. Isn't it better than just to take it? But nobody just takes it, Sonny cried. That's what I'm telling you. Everybody tries not to. You're just hung up on the way some people try. It's not your way. And then in the culmination of...
Before we get there.
Yeah.
Go ahead. There is so much in this story, this short story, that it very well could be and probably deserves to be an entire episode.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to say that. I wanted to maybe share the interaction between his teacher and his mom, because I wanted to show that there's other characters in this story that, including their dad, who had a brother who passed away in this terrible tragedy, that is race-based and also involved a lot of people being drunk, and it's whew. But I wanted to read this little interaction between the narrator and his mom. Before we go to the end, because I think this whole thing is worth reading.
Oh, yeah.
And also the ending of it is so powerful. That it can, I think, overshadow the rest, but it doesn't actually as you're reading through it. Like everything builds to it.
Yeah.
So, but here, this is page 133. The narrator has just learned that his dad had a brother, that his brother was killed. A few paragraphs before, his mom says this. Oh yes, your daddy never did really get right again after his brother died. Till the day he died, he weren't sure, but that every white man he saw was the man that killed his brother. Skipping forward. I ain't telling you all this, she said, to make you scared or bitter or to make you hate nobody. I'm telling you this because you got a brother and the world ain't changed. Skipping ahead even more. His mom's crying and he's been like paralyzed. She was crying again. I couldn't move. I said, Lord, Lord, Mama, I didn't know it was like that. Oh, honey, she said, there's a lot that you don't know, but you are going to find it out. She stood up from the window and came over to me. You got to hold on to your brother, she said, and don't let him fall. No matter what it looks like is happening to him, and no matter how evil you get with him. You're going to be evil with him many a time, but don't you forget what I told you. You hear? I won't forget, I said. Don't you worry. I won't forget. I won't let nothing happen to Sonny. My mother smiled as though she were amused at something she saw in my face. Then, you may not be able to stop nothing from happening, but you got to let him know you's there. And I'll pause for a moment before I read the next sentence. That interaction, there's so much depth to it. And there's so much to this story that's been communicated, both from what's said and what's not said, like in the pauses. And I think that's that interaction is what drives this story and drives this relationship between the narrator and his brother, Sonny. the next sentence, which is in a new paragraph, a whole break, it says this. 2 days later, I was married, and then I was gone. And I had a lot of things on my mind, and I pretty well forgot my promise to Mama until I got shipped home on a special furlough for her funeral. And that's afterwards when his brother Sonny, who's much younger than him, tells him that he wants to go into the Navy or Army. He wants to be a musician, sorry. Tells him that he wants to be a musician. And then this whole, like, brother acting like a father thing happens. And there's so many cool things in that. I think that's what builds... I think that I wanted to share that before we dive into the end.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll just say, if you don't want to have this spoiled for you, you turn the podcast off and go read it.
You can't have this spoiled, though. I mean, I don't know if it'll be any less powerful.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah,
right. It's not a twist. This is no a twist ending.
Yeah,
it's a culmination.
Yeah, I just mean if you want to experience it fresh, you know. Yeah.
This whole thing probably takes 30 minutes to read. Yeah.
Just sit down. Have a glass of something calming.
Yeah, it's 27 pages. Baldwin. Yeah. About 30 minutes. 30 to 60 minutes. You can read it slow and take as much time.
I'll read this and then we can get to Devil Finds Work. If we can. So there's just a lovely build-up in it. I'm just going to read this second to last paragraph of the story. And Sonny is he's getting his feet with the piano, and then finally the musicians kind of sense that he's got it. And if you've ever jammed with people, like this is exactly what it's like. It's like sometimes you play for like half an hour and you're not like in it. And then all of a sudden, like you sense either you've got it or someone has got it, and you're just like, okay, now it's go time. And when you're all really listening to each other and your ears are open, this is what happens.
I want to add, Sonny hasn't played the piano in over a year, because he had an overdose and was recovering and was in some type of facility. He hasn't seen these people in forever. I think they know he's back in town. And these are also people he's played with for a long time as well, like before this happened. So like, there's also something, and this is something I never really got to, which I got to with maybe one or two people. Like, he's not just jamming with people he doesn't know. Like they know each other. They know that this is Sonny's time to speak out. And Creole, who's the bass player and leader of this band, is like giving this push and give and go, and he's holding things in tight, and then he's moving things around. And this is where at one point, they're starting to get it, and there's this communication happening, and the narrator's sitting in the back corner, and he doesn't know music, but he clearly knows his brother, and he clearly can read a scene and read people communicating, and they're just celebrating with Sonny when he gets it. And then Creole's like, nah, we got to remember that this is the blues. And he brings them back into the blues, which is why they were all gathered together. And now you can take it away.
Then they all gathered around Sonny, and Sonny played. Every now and again, one of them seemed to say, Amen. Sonny's fingers filled the air with life. his life. But that life contained so many others, and Sonny went all the way back. He really began with the spare, flat statement of the opening phrase of the song. Then he began to make it his. It was very beautiful because it wasn't hurried, and it was no longer a lament. I seemed to hear with what burning he had made it his, with what burning we had yet to make it ours, how we could cease lamenting. Freedom lurked around us, and I understood at last that he could help us to be free if we would listen. That he would never be free until we did. Yet there was no battle in his face now. I heard what he had gone through and would continue to go through until he came to rest in earth. He had made it his, that long line of which we knew only Mama and Daddy, and he was giving it back, as everything must be given back, so that passing through death, it can live forever. I saw my mother's face again, and felt for the first time how the stones of the road she had walked on must have bruised her feet. I saw the moonlit road where my father's brother died, and it brought something else back to me, and carried me past it. I saw my little girl again, and felt Isabel's tears again, and I felt my own tears begin to rise, and I was yet aware that this was only a moment, that the world waited outside, as hungry as a tiger, and that trouble stretched above us longer than the sky. Then it was over. Creel and Sonny let out their breath, both soaking wet and grinning. There was a lot of applause, and some of it was real. In the dark, the girl came by, and I asked her to take drinks to the bandstand. There was a long pause while they talked up there in the indigo light, and after a while I saw the girl put a scotch and milk on top of the piano for Sonny. He didn't seem to notice it, but just before they started playing again, he sipped from it and looked toward me and nodded. Then he put it back on top of the piano. For me, then, as they began to play again, it glowed and shook above my brother's head like the very cup of trembling.
Where does this bring you? Where are you, Hunter, as you read this? I'm in a specific place when I read this, so where are you?
Where am I?
Does
Like
it bring
a
you?
physical place?
Does it bring you to a physical space, a physical memory?
I don't know. I'm very stuck in the story. I have visions of moments when I have felt like I've come close to something like that in my playing, jamming with people. Specific, like, solos or moments that have felt important. What about you?
It brings me back to sitting at the Green Mile. It's Al Capone's bar, the bar known for Al Capone in the city of Chicago. And it's when there's a band playing, you are not allowed to stand. I mean, some people can go to the bathroom, but like you're not allowed to talk or move. Like it is, you are there to listen. It's not quite a listening lounge, but it is the step just below it, and it is, it's a little dank in there. It's a little, and it brings me into that space, and seeing a specific group, not because that group reminds me especially of this group, but just seeing that group just jamming away together. When writing for all the beauties of its medium is so much less subtle than almost any other form of art. Because you're literally putting black on white or white letters on black paper, whatever it might be, to try to, and it's so, the word barbaric is coming to my mind, not in the sense that it's barbaric, but in the sense of like, it's just, it is what it is. And yet with music, you are communicating so much in every beat. I mean, it's why 10 people can listen to a song played for 3 minutes, and each of them can write a 30-minute article on it, and none of them will be the same because there's so much communicated and it's so personal. And it's really, I mean, I've never tried to write a scene of music playing. I think I'd be scared to if I started. I think I would be like, how do I communicate this? How do you communicate music? Like the way that most books communicate music is just by writing the words of the song. And the way you then consume it as a reader is as a poem. Right? And it's only if that book is made into a movie or into an album that you hear a version of it sung, right? It's why one of the most powerful scenes in Return of the King, Lord of the Rings, is when Pippin is singing to Lord Denethor, and it's a song from the first book. I think it's a song sung in Fellowship. It might even be a song sung around. It doesn't matter. And all right, that home is behind the world ahead. There are many paths to tread. Like they have that whole zooming in of Gandalf, like right. You brought to it
tomato.
Yes, like how do you communicate music? This is what the reason I'm bringing us there is that it's an example I have in my head of like how do you communicate that in writing? You don't, right? You communicate it by writing the words of it and then like trying to set the ambiance and then going on to the next scene and maybe talk about how people are responding afterwards. You don't get writing, at least I don't see writing often, that's able to communicate the actual playing and the interactions and the movement of the music and the soul of the music and the depth that people bring with them to a moment when they are the musicians, right? Because the way you show up to playing impacts how you play.
Yeah.
When you are like frustrated and you go to a band practice, it's clear. And, you know, and this scene that you read, it captured, and as well as the many paragraphs before it, capture the depth of it and are even deeper and more full when you've spent time in Sonny's story.
Yeah.
I was not planning on going all the way there. I was planning on just talking about my experience in that particular bar that one time. But I'm so glad you read the whole ending of this, and I want to stop talking and hear all of your thoughts because I've monologued.
Well, I mean, you've said a lot of what I would want to say. I guess what I'll, as a sort of transition to Devil Finds Work, is when Baldwin writes, I seemed to hear with what burning he had made it his, with what burning we had yet to make it ours, how we could cease lamenting. Freedom lurked around us, and I understood at last that he could help us to be free if we would listen, that he would never be free until we did. He had made it his, that long line of which we knew only Mama and Daddy, and he was giving it back, as everything must be given back, so that passing through death, it can live forever. Baldwin, he does for me what Sonny does. Like he made life his, and you can sense in his writing, like, with what burning he had made it his, like, with what pain. And the thing about Baldwin is that as much as he is dealing with pain and, you know, some of the most painful history in the history of the world, he's never, like, despairing or unpleasant to read for me. Like, it had ceased to be a lament, you know, and that's on our episode when I talked about the blues. I said, you know, blues is like redeeming our pain, and that's what Baldwin is like for me in writing. Is he's redeeming his pain, and he's not a perfect writer. There's things that sometimes, you know, he just takes on so many battles a lot of time, and he doesn't always win. But he made life his, and he gives it back to us, so that passing through death, we can live forever. And with that, we'll go to Devil Finds Work. The Devil Finds Work is, I believe he wrote it later on after Fire Next Time and Notes of a Native Son. It is a series of essays. It's quite long. It's book length. It has chapters. And he just talks about films, basically. And he said in his autobiographical notes, he has like a morbid desire to like buy a 15mm camera and shoot experimental film movies. So he has a fascination with the cinema. But and so that's mostly what The Devil Finds Work is just him watching movies. But this is Baldwin, where he doesn't limit himself to just the film. You know, he talks about what the film is saying, not just in the film, but what it's saying about the people who make it and the people who see it, and the lies that are being corroborated on the screen, and what it might say about the fantasies of the people who are making these things, and paying for them. And The Devil Finds Work, for me, I read it for the third time for this episode, and for me it has really been a key that kind of unlocked the screen to me. Like how we interact with screens. And there's several quotes that I'd like to share from Devil Finds Work.
Go for it.
Do you have anything? Okay.
I have a couple thoughts, but
okay.
Not enough to drive a conversation.
Yeah. So the first one is I am quoting from the Baldwin Collected Essays Library of America. So that's where my page numbers are coming from. I believe this is in chapter 1. It's on page 500. He says, he talks about how a movie star is sort of like an escape personality, and how like the moviegoer sort of can escape into the personality of the movie star when they're watching the movie. And he says that the movie star is an escape personality indicates one of the irreducible dangers to which the moviegoer is exposed. the danger of surrendering to the corroboration of one's fantasies on the screen. And this, to me, unlocks not just how we respond to movies, but how we respond to social media. And any image on a screen is we're in the danger of surrendering to the corroboration of our fantasies. Whether that fantasy is, for me, I watch a lot of reviews about guitar pedals and guitars, and sometimes lesson content about guitars and stuff. So, for me, as a fantasy of being a Guitar Hero or something like that, or being an expert on guitar gear or something. But I don't buy as many pedals as I watch, so I don't actually know. I don't know. And there's so many variables when it comes to sound when you're listening to something versus how something sounds in person. That's why it's always important to play the instrument that you're going to buy before you buy it, because even if they have a demo and some other guitarist is like, yeah, it feels great, that doesn't mean it's going to sound and feel great to you. Mm-hmm. And this is the lie of the screen, is that we sort of take it for reality, and it's the corroboration of our fantasies. And so often we put onto it what we want to believe. And if you think about news and the bias that different news channels show, and how people can get funneled into believing things because they're only seeing one side, that is only, even if they're sharing accurate facts, the facts that they choose to share and the news that they choose to share influences what you think. Mm-hmm. That's just why it is important to read lots of different news outlets with lots of different biases so you can compare and fact check them, even though it's incredibly exhausting to do that. But so that's like the first quote that I think about it all the time in our screen-based society at this point. Yeah. And it sort of leads into the next one. If you want to respond, I'll just read this first. He said on page 504, this is at the end of chapter 1. He says, "It is said that the camera cannot lie, but rarely do we allow it to do anything else, since the camera sees what you point it at. The camera sees what you want it to see. The language of the camera is the language of our dreams." And just before that, he was talking about how he went and saw an all-black production of Macbeth.
Yep.
And it totally changed his life when he saw it, because he uses the phrase it was flesh testifying to flesh. And if you've ever gone to live theater, there is something different in the air when there's a real live person in front of you.
Oh yeah.
Testifying, especially with Shakespeare and Macbeth. We saw King Lear over the summer, and it was
and you can tell if somebody is reciting lines versus if they understand what it is they're saying. There's a difference. And you can hear that as a listener. He also says they could be Macbeth only because they were themselves. Mm-hmm. And he compared that again to the film.
Yeah.
So now we skip ahead. Pretty, few dozen pages.
Yeah. There's so much, and I'd say that, I would recommend reading if you're going to do the nonfiction Notes of a Native Son, or probably The Fire Next Time, because those are great. The Double Fine's work it's less like focus. He's talking about films and things, and to me, Baldwin, you could take, every couple pages there'll be a quote or a paragraph that you could just take that and sit on for weeks, just thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of great stuff in Double Fine's work. There's this whole part where he talks about the McCarthy era and the sort of like living through the paranoia of it, and just how pathetic it was, like the hysteria and everything. Really fascinating. And I guess before we get to the end, I'm going on a lot, but that's what a podcast is for, I guess. Reading Baldwin, to me, almost in a way, it was like rediscovering history, because we learn about the civil rights movement in school, and the McCarthy era, the Red Scare. Like, we learn about these things, but we don't really we don't take the time to like think about what it was like to live through it, to be there, and to see a different side of it. What would have been like to be a black man during that time. And and because Baldwin is so committed to his experience and examining his experience, he has a way of, like, if you let him, he'll draw you in to what it is like to be there and to really imagine it. And it's really helped me in imagining history as not just a collection of dates and things like that, but, life. I also went and watched some of the films that he talks about, because he talks about a lot of them. But.
Yeah, so with that, why did you choose The Exorcist? Why? That's the one you chose, ultimately. I mean, there's a couple pages we read before that, but...
Yeah. So, I don't think I've seen this version of The Exorcist. I don't think I want to, but...
Nope.
I think... What I remember from my first read and second read is, like, he says the Americans should really know more about evil than that, because The Exorcist is sort of well, I should get actual. The film terrified me on two levels. The first, as I have tried to indicate, involved my deliberate attempt to leave myself open to it, and to the extent, indeed, of reliving my adolescent holy roller terrors. It was very important for me not to pretend to have surmounted the pain and terror of that time of my life. Very important not to pretend that it left no mark on me. It marked me forever. In some measure, I encountered the abyss of my own soul, the labyrinth of my destiny. These could never be escaped. To challenge these imponderables being precisely the heavy, tattered glory of the gift of God. To encounter oneself is to encounter the other, and this is love. If I know that my soul trembles, I know that yours does too. And if I can respect this, both of us can live. Neither of us truly can live without the other. a statement which would not sound so banal if one were not endlessly compelled to repeat it, and further, believe it and act on that belief. My friend was quite right when he said, "So we must be careful lest we lose our faith and become possessed. For I have seen the devil by day and by night, and have seen him in you and in me, in the eyes of the cop and the sheriff and the deputy, the landlord, the housewife, the football player, in the eyes of some junkies, the eyes of some preachers, the eyes of some governors, presidents, wardens, in the eyes of some orphans, and in the eyes of my Father, and in my mirror. It is that moment when no other human being is real for you, nor are you real for yourself. This devil has no need of any dogma, though he can use them all, nor does he need any historical justification, history being so largely his invention. He does not levitate beds or fool around with little girls. We do."
That makes sense. That was what I got to. I skipped over some parts of it because they were too creepy, and I didn't want to.
Yeah. But it's that's the thing is about The Exorcist is that like, yes, like he describes some really messed up things in there. He's like, yeah, just really obscene and gross castrations and murders, and just. But the thing is that like. What is actually more terrifying? Because, like, what is actually more evil? Because if you think about slavery and just the unimaginable horrors that people were put through, that's way more terrifying. And yet, when Hollywood goes to make a horror film, they fill it with all of these obscenities that are just kind of shocking to see on a screen.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, why he says, they should really know more about evil than that. And he says, if they pretend otherwise, they are lying, and any black man, and not only blacks, many, many others, including white children, can call them on this lie. He who has been treated as the devil recognizes the devil when they meet.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, I didn't know quite what I was reading, like when I read The Devil Finds Work the first time, until I read this last part, and I started to realize that, like, films, they reveal, in a sense, they reveal more about the terrors or the joys or the fantasies or the pain or the hope of the people who are making it,
Mm-hmm.
than it says anything about the audience, and in a way, like there's sort of like a mirror, but a mirror that lies.
Yeah. The devil is much more often communicating in soothing, calming, logical voices.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because otherwise, the devil causes people to run to God, thus defeating the devil's entire goal.
Right. Right.
Nothing so terrifying as the slow path that leads to destruction.
Yeah. In our church, the devil had many faces, all of them one's own. He was not always evil. Rarely was he frightening. He was, more often, subtle, charming, cunning, and warm. So one learned, for example, never to take the easy way out. Whatever looked easy was almost certainly a trap. In short, the devil was that mirror which could never be smashed. One had to look into the mirror every day. Good morning, Blues. Blues, how do you do? Well, I'm doing all right. Good morning. How are you? Check it all out and take it all in and travel. The pleading of the blood was not for us a way of exorcising a Satan whom we knew could never sleep. It was to engage Satan in a battle which we knew could never end. In that line, the mirror which could never be smashed. Like, I read that and I immediately thought of smartphones. Because as much as we want to, we can't smash them.
Yeah.
We need them to live now. We've created
we have
a world where you can't really live without a smartphone. Much as you want to smash it.
Hunter, any thoughts to leave us with tonight?
I guess I'll leave us with how Baldwin's writing kind of has affected me. I'll leave us with a story. I was on a vacation in Massachusetts, and we were at a hotel, and it was sort of like a rainy day. We didn't have anything to do, and the kids were going crazy. So they had a movie theater at the hotel, and the only movie that was kid-friendly was the Minecraft movie. So we went to the Minecraft movie, and this is not relevant, but while we were waiting in it, there were a couple of goons, I'd say anywhere from 5th to 7th grade, making hentai noises on their phones, just like walking in and making these, having their phones make inappropriate noises, and like giggling. And they walked in, and I just ended up yelling at them to just leave. If they're not going to watch the movie, just leave. And they did. And so I was sitting with my kids on my lap, feeding them Sour Patch watermelons and watching the Minecraft movie, which is not so much a movie, but it's like a collection of memes. And there's a black character in the movie. And I was reading Devil Finds Work on this vacation. And so I was paying attention to the black character and how they were treated, because that's something that Baldwin does a lot when he talks about the movies that he sees. And I noticed that this is a movie that was made in like 2024 or whatever. And yet there was almost the black character was the same like black friend character. The way that they treated the character was like as a way to say like, we have a black character in the movie, so everything's fine. Our conscience is okay. And every time you started to learn something about Dawn's character, like, and I don't care that this movie doesn't make any sense. I don't care that it's a bad movie, because we're still watching it. Like, you know, it doesn't matter if it's a bad movie or not. Like, I'm going to take the messaging seriously. And every time you learn something about Dawn's character, she has like, quote unquote, 15 side hustles. She's a black woman who has to work 15 side hustles to make ends meet. She's helping out these white brother and sister, every time you start to learn more about Don's life, which honestly sounds a lot more interesting and stressful than all the white characters in this movie. Certainly more interesting than Jack Black's character. But it pivots away to like a joke or something. And so she's just sort of there to like be a black person in the movie and be like the black friend. Key and Peele have a great skit about the like magical black character in a movie. But anyway, so that's how the Double Fine's work has shaped me. Is now every time I watch a movie, I just try to pay attention to what it's saying about race, and not necessarily about race, just about the people who are making the movie and what we believe about them, and what they're asking us to believe.
Yeah. Do I have our next episode?
Okay, hang on. I have one more quote. Sorry.
Okay, no.
To end this out.
End with the quote.
I'm going to end this out. I want to shout out to Equal in Paris, which was one of my favorite essays from Notes of a Native Son. Just the sardonic tone and like the dry humor that Baldwin has. It makes me laugh. But he's talking about culture when he's in Paris and he sort of accidentally gets arrested because his friend like stole a bed and put it in his room or something like that. He didn't do anything wrong, but he ends up like in jail for like a week or something because that's
in real life.
In real life, yes. Equal in Paris. It's really sad, but it's the way that he narrates it just is really funny. And he talks about culture, and this is to this day like the only true statement I've ever heard someone say about culture, because we say so many things about culture, but I don't think any of us really understand what culture actually is. Like, what is cultural and what is just human, and it's all muddy. But he says, one had, in short, to come into contact with an alien culture in order to understand that a culture was not a community basket-weaving project, nor yet an act of God, was something neither desirable nor undesirable in itself, being inevitable, being nothing more or less than the recorded invisible effects on a body of people of the vicissitudes with which they have been forced to deal. And their great men are revealed as simply another of these vicissitudes, even if, quite against their will, the brief battle of their great men with them has left them richer.